Welcome to the Powerful Podcast, where you will learn the marketing, strategies, and beliefs to grow your dream business. Totally possible, and I'm so excited to share this with you. I'm Almira Bardai, and I grew and scaled my own business from zero to multi-millions and sold the business. And now I'm here to teach you exactly how to grow and scale your business from 6 to 7 figures and more with ease, simplicity, joy, and fun with, of course, strategy, mindset, and marketing to take you to that next level. Welcome back to the Powerful Podcast. I'm so excited about today's guest. And I know I'm always excited about the guest, but this one is really extra special and exciting because we're talking about financial freedom, which is always amazing, but you want to hear it from Justin's perspective. So I'm super excited to welcome Justin Buonomo, founder and CEO of Journey to Financial Freedom, also known as JFF. I'm going to let Justin introduce himself because this also goes into his story and his perspective, beliefs, and experiences with money and how he's teaching entrepreneurs financial freedom. So straight over to you, Justin. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your story.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. It was funny when we first hopped on before we hit the record button. We're like, feel like we know each other, but never really interacted one-on-one, but we've known each other for years. And the connection's always been there. So I was honored when you asked me to hop on here and giving me the microphone when it comes to finances and my stories. Always a risky situation, but I'm happy to share. And so Amira mentioned, I own a company called JFF, or Journey to Financial Freedom, which is actually the end goal for our clients. And so we do financial coaching and strategy for what we call purpose-driven individuals. And a purpose-driven individual to me is just somebody that wants the best out of life, realizes that they're not living that yet. And one of the main tools to allow them to get there and design their dream life is money, right? And they want to learn how to manage their money and optimize their situation. I love the quote. It's our company slogan: money's the tool, but freedom's the goal. And so we've had the opportunity over the past 4+ years. Have been so blessed to have close to 1,000 people go through our program. I've got an amazing team that works for me right now. We've got, I think, about 156 active clients. And it's just been an extremely incredible journey. But that journey started all the way back when I was 10 years old. And my parents filed for bankruptcy for the second time. And because of that, they got a divorce. We lost our house and both of our cars. I literally watched my cars get repoed when I was 10 years old. And to me, the worst of it was when my parents moved to these rental properties, they didn't allow pets. So I had to give away my 3-year-old dog at the time.
Ooh.
And so at 10 years old, it was a lot deeper than just money, but like it looked to me that I lost everything because of money. And so I made a promise to myself, when I can control it one day, I will never let my family go through what I went through, you know? And so got older though, turned 18, started making my own mistakes with money. Though I made that promise at 10, it took me a little bit to implement it and integrate what that actually looked like. And when I turned 18, I actually got a settlement for $80,000 for getting hit by a car when I was 13. And that was my money. Like, my parents couldn't tell me what to do with it. Like, it was nobody's money but mine. It went literally on my 18th birthday into my checking account.
Wow.
And then I moved away 6 hours to college to play college lacrosse in Maryland. No supervision whatsoever, no financial literacy, just saw what I saw growing up, right? And it was even like that after they filed for that bankruptcy. They struggled ever since. And to say that I blew that money would be a compliment. It would be a compliment. And so fast forward a little bit here, I get done with my master's degree. I'm 23 years old, and Johns Hopkins Medicine hires me for a position that I had no business being in. I think they were just super desperate, and I interviewed fairly decently. And they gave me a salary that I remember. Thankfully, I was wise enough now where I was like, okay, I'm only going to make more money, right? If I keep climbing the ladder here. I don't want to be that guy who's making a lot of money who doesn't have any. And I definitely don't want to repeat what I saw as a child. So it was then at 23 years old where I decided, like, okay, I'm going to increase my financial literacy. And it's kind of just where this whole thing started.
Mm-hmm. I love that so much. So here's one question that I have because, jumping right into it, is that, of course, we talk about money and abundance being, connected with the universe and being connected with God. So that's very much 5D. But in the 3D, you of course need to have what I'm simply going to call proper spending habits and financial management. So how does the two work together? Because they actually seem quite opposite. Because you see people on social media saying, I tapped into higher consciousness and there's unlimited wealth and abundance from the universe. So theoretically, that would mean I can do whatever I want with money. So, how
Mm,
do these two concepts work together? And how do you work with those two concepts?
such a good question. Okay. So I love Joe Dispenza. He's one of the biggest guys in the meditation visualization space. And he says it's one thing to visualize your future. It's another thing to get up and go act on it and attract it.
Mhm.
Right. And so I'm a big fan of both. Right. I kind of see it as the healthy blend between masculine and feminine energy.
Mhm.
Right. Where feminine energy is like a body of water,
Mhm.
right, that just free flows everywhere.
Mhm.
Masculine energy is like the river banks to a river.
Mhm.
Right. When you add it in, the water can still flow, but it flows with purpose, intention, and direction.
Yeah.
And so the visualizations and the meditations and the tapping in are so super important, but you're not going to meditate $1 million to your front doorstep or into your bank account, right? You
Damn.
have to get go act on
Damn.
it.
All of my manifesting
Oh,
wasted.
shoot. But you have to get up and go act on it, right? And so, uh, my mentor gives me the question all the time, and he's like, you have to ponder the question of what's the healthy balance of surrender and self-reliance when it comes to your finances. And
Mm.
so self-reliance being your free will, like God, after I visualize, isn't going to get up and go market for me. He's not going to get up and talk to prospects for me. He's not going to get up and do this episode for me. Right. And so those are some of like the overarching themes that I kind of tie them together and marry them. Like they're both needed to get best results with your finances. You're not going to hustle culture your way to the best financial situation, and you're not also not going to meditate your way to the best financial situation. We've got to blend both. And I also see the action as stewardship, if you will. Right. What
Mm.
I mean by that is I often tell people like more money is not the solution. I'm not against making more money. There's just a time and a place for it. But if you have poor money habits, all more money is going to do, it's going to accentuate your poor money habits. You'll
Mm.
make more, you'll spend more, you'll make more, you'll see just as little, and you'll make more. You have the same exact problems that you had in the past when you had less money coming in.
Mhm.
Right. And so when you step up and take control of your current situation, take action,
Mhm.
right? And also spend. I want you to spend your money, but spend with humility,
Mhm.
right? It's good stewardship, right? That allows you to not put self-imposed blocks on your financial situation. Just because money is abundant doesn't mean it's going to flow to you abundantly. Doesn't mean it's always going to be there.
Mhm.
Money is energy, and usually the way that we manage it assigns the energy to it. And that's usually what attracts it back to us in a similar fashion, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so basically what I'm saying here is that, yeah, money is abundant, but it doesn't mean it's going to flow to you freely. And always your actions that show how you are willing and deserving of that money is really what's going to dictate the flow. And so I hope that answered at least got us started a little bit. I could go
Yes.
7 different ways with that, but
I love it. So going back to deserving, and I'm sure, and I've actually done your JFF mini program, and I remember you talking about, deserving and worth. And what does that actually mean? Because I think people often look at money and say, yes, I deserve it, but they're not getting as much as they desire. So then it's almost a self-imposed limitation of the universe or people must think I'm not deserving of it. So how do it's so murky and it's such a hard one. How do
yeah.
you clear that up and clean it up?
Mm. Deserving, the way that I was using that is in most instances, God won't bless you with more if you're not handling your current situation correctly,
Mhm.
right? And when I say correctly, I don't mean perfectly,
Mhm.
right? Because I
Perfect.
don't
I
have,
love that.
right? I don't mean perfectly,
Yeah.
right? There just has to be a certain level of care, intent, diligence, and respect for it,
Mhm.
right? And so I always say your relationship with money is like a relationship with anybody else. Let's just say like your significant other.
Mhm.
And would you neglect, ignore, and disrespect your significant other and expect to get best outcomes, let alone for them to stick around,
Mhm.
right? Same thing with money.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the deserving side, it's not about being perfect. It's not about the mistakes that you've made either, right? It's just about stepping up and making an honest effort to take control of your current situation. And that usually helps you attract more.
Mhm.
And so the other thing that I'll say too, to help with that deserving part, I tell people this all the time, but the most people listening to this, the majority of the mistakes that they've made or the lack of progress they have financially is not your fault.
Mm.
It's not. You just did the best you could with the opportunities that were given you. And most of us just mirror what we saw as children.
Yes.
And our money actions and behaviors are so deep. And most times they're rooted in things that weren't our fault,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know? And so I like to tell people that, like, don't let that hold you back. But also at the same time, your past may have not been your fault, but it is your responsibility to step up and take care of your future.
Ooh.
Right? And so I think that's kind of how we get to a better understanding and implementation around the concept of deserving.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Talking about the responsibility part and taking care of your money, because I know this is such a big piece of what you teach. I've seen my own coaches and mentors who you work with, like Kelly Brock, or there's other clients of yours who are, screenshotting their sessions with you and talking about just checking your bank account and not having your body and your nervous system freak out completely. So,
Yeah.
what does that, I guess, dive into your method, your system, if you will, of getting to know your money, being calm with your money, and then starting to go into the budgeting methods and kind of the nitty gritty of all of it, because there's so much of your secret sauce is in all of that. And
Yeah.
it also starts to change how you physically take care of your money, again, without freaking out. So let's talk about that.
Okay. A couple of things come to mind. The first thing is that the majority of people's stresses and anxieties in life can most times be linked back to money somehow, some way.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I would say 95% of people's stresses and anxieties around money are avoidable and they're caused by what I call subjectivity,
Yeah.
a gray area, right? I think I should be managing my money better. I think I should be saving for this. I think I should pay this off. I think this bill's due at this time. I think I should invest in this. I think I'm behind in my finances. Not being insensitive to people's emotions or thoughts, but usually all of that I think
Mhm.
is a gray area. It's what I call subjectivity, non-factual information. And when
Mhm.
you replace it with objectivity,
Mhm.
black and white factual information, most times 95% of the stresses and anxieties go away, just from a clarity standpoint,
Yeah.
from an empowerment standpoint, and just understanding what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And so that's usually what we try to do or try to solve for and solve for the subjectivity by providing objectivity with some of our systems, which I'll get into. But our end goal for our clients is financial freedom,
Mhm.
right? Financial freedom is living life on your own terms with freedom of choice and time with no worries of money. And why are you able to do that? Because you own assets that an asset or assets that make you enough money each month automatically to cover your expenses and your lifestyle, whether you choose to show up or not.
Mhm.
Right. And that asset, it's a fancy word. All an asset means is just something that is money, is making you money, or can make you money. And so usually the second option is something that is making you money. And really your three options there: stocks and bonds, real estate, or a business,
Mm.
right? Those are your three options for the asset that's going to provide you financial freedom. Another word that we'll use instead of asset or phrase is your financial freedom vehicle.
Hmm.
It's like, what's your vehicle that's getting you there? And most times it's not your day job and your 401k,
Mm.
right? And so stocks and bonds, they're for the long haul. Unless you want to get very risky and or learn how to day trade, not against the stock market. I invest a lot of money in it, but I understand it's for the long haul and it's not going to make me financially free next year.
Mm.
Right? Real estate, most people, even with a good income and good credit score, it would take you up to 10 years most times
Yeah.
for the passive income that is coming in from the real estate to be able to provide you financial freedom,
Mhm.
right? And that's even on a limited budget.
Mhm.
Like if your expenses don't increase right now all the way for the next 10 years, then the passive income coming in will be able to cover those. But like most people want a bigger house, a nicer car, more vacations, and I'm fine with that. I
Yeah.
want you to spend your money. I want you to live your life.
Yep.
And so then that just leaves the business option, right? And so those, when I talk about financial freedom, that's my definition of it. And then now we reverse engineer it all the way back for a four-step process that I have followed and all of our most successful clients have followed, and or the people that are actively working with us right now are following. And so step one is implementing the right systems around your money while in parallel building a better relationship with it. Systems are like your tools, right? Your budget, your balance sheet, right? Budget is just showing us your cash flow, right? What's coming in, what's going out, and can we build a little bit of lifestyle in there for you so you're not eating ramen, staring at the wall with no TV for the rest of your life, right? And so, and then your balance sheet, just very simply put, it's your assets versus your liabilities, or what you're worth versus what you owe. We need to implement that first because that's the black and white. That's the objectivity, right? That allows us to actually see what's going on, alleviates your stress, and then use that information for step two, which I'll get to here in a second, right? And then in parallel with the systems, right, or your tools, I like to say, now we have to build a better relationship with money. I always say your external wealth will never exceed your internal wealth. So if you have negative, limiting, scarce, and fearful thoughts about money, guess what you're probably going to see in your external reality? Something fairly similar. And to put it a little bit more bluntly, I often tell people most times the amount of money you have in your bank account is usually just a direct reflection of what's going on inside of you.
Yeah.
And so that's usually step one, right? And step two is then implementing the right strategies for your goals, or what I would call a mission for your money. This is where people get most caught up on not just creating the goals that they should be going after financially, but actually creating a plan that you can follow and stick to. And so people get most caught up here because they're like, should I be saving money? Should I be paying off this debt? Should I buy a house? Should I be investing? Right. And they're getting advice from the wrong places, which leads to thinking, which leads to confusion, which leads to inaction. Right. And if they do take action, most times it's not optimal action. Right. And so this is where we need to figure out, for one, what makes most sense for you as a unique human being to be working after goal wise, right? Like, what's your top three goals? So let's say, okay, you want to build an emergency fund, you want to pay off your credit cards, and you're going to buy a house, right? Great. Let's say that those make sense for you. So next thing is what I call cadence of accomplishments, right? We have to figure out, just a very fancy way of saying, what should you be going after first, second, and third, and what goals can you run in parallel? So if you wanted to fix your credit and buy a house, we should probably fix your credit first to optimize the home purchase process. Right? But if you had a goal of making more money and saving more money, we could probably run those in parallel. Right? So that's step two, implementing the right strategies and goals for your finances. Now that we have the mindset that'll actually allow us to accomplish those and the tools that we need to be able to build the strategies off of. Step three is now just increasing your income, but particularly we need to figure out what is your financial freedom vehicle in this step, right? And or optimize your current one. And so I always tell people, you notice I didn't start here. Step three being increasing your income, right? Because it doesn't make sense until steps one and two, where the foundations are in place, right? I'm not against making more money. It's huge to your financial situation. It's just got to make sense. And usually at step three, once steps one and two are done, that's when we can figure out how to make the most money you've ever made, usually by figuring out what your vehicle is or optimizing the current one. And then the last step, step four, is now what I'll just label as generating passive income, or what I'll also say, making you financially unshakable. And so if we did steps one, two, and three correctly, particularly steps three, we should not only be making a lot more money, but we should be seeing a lot more money at the end of the month, or savings or profit, right? What's left over from your income after you deduct expenses. We now need to take that money and invest it on the back end in a way that makes you financially unshakable. A way that you could do this is now purchasing more financial freedom vehicles, right? And so, for example, JFF was my first vehicle. Once it started doing very well, my wife and I in step four, we've bought several other vehicles, right, that make us financially free. So if JFF is down 1 year or doing bad, then the other two or three that we have, they're doing well and we're still up in totality, and vice versa. And so I always tell people at step four, it's like, imagine if you never had to worry about what's going on in the stock market, what's going on in society, or what's going on in the world, right? Because no matter what, you're financially unshakable. And so financial freedom really just being that end goal where you can just live life on your own terms. You don't got to wait till 65 to retire, which I heard the other day called wealth in a wheelchair. It just never made sense to me, right? To trade your youth and your health for possible retirement down the road while going to something that you don't love every day to get there. And so yeah, so that's kind of what stood out to me as your answer. I told you I was gonna get down a few rabbit holes today, and here we
Love
are.
it. I love the rabbit holes. And I think what you also point out is that it needs to be designed. I think, especially as entrepreneurs go into business, or particularly if somebody like myself, my background is in PR, and I ended up setting up a PR agency, is that practitioners go into the business as entrepreneurs, but they're not necessarily business people. Like that has to be learned and that needs to be taught. And I think that there's this general idea that if you keep doing whatever it is that you're doing, or if you can find some growth strategy, that it's just all eventually going to work itself out. And I think that's the biggest myth, because you actually need to intentionally design something and also determine what your goal is. Because for some people, the goal is to sell the business, in which case you're determining how much cash you want to keep in the business, or it's going to determine how many people that you hire. Like literally every decision that you make is based on that specific goal. Whereas for other people, especially my business, we were a lifestyle business. So which was great, but we ended up having to normalize our numbers and work with the accountants at the end, which actually cost us more money to normalize the books to do a sale. So we needed to actually have our strategy and clearly design what it is that we wanted to end up with to be able to get the ultimate goal. But see, I talk just as much, which I love. This is why I have a
I'm
podcast.
following. I love it.
Love it. But you point out the fact that it needs to be designed and individually designed. And also, what is your financial freedom number? I think that was one of the biggest things that I've learned is that, well, I just want to be a billionaire. And I actually had a financial advisor that I was working with, and she says, but no, actually, what do you want? I'm like, well, I want millions of dollars and I want to sit and retire. And she says, that's not a plan, which is so true. And I think it's a wonderful, I don't want to say the word fantasy, but it's almost a fantasy because there's no design behind it. And
Hmm.
I know structure is such a boring word. Stuff like that makes a lot of entrepreneurs, or just generally people, eye roll or not want to take the responsibility of it. But you have to have the design in mind so that you're not wealthy in a wheelchair. I love that as you said that. And I think also our world and our economy has changed so much that I don't know if people want to quote unquote retire as we used to. That's boring. We want more out of our lives, or we want to do something different, or particularly we want to be healthier during that time of life to actually enjoy life. So that
Hmm.
design element to me is just so key, because that's how you end up getting what it is you actually desire.
1000% agree. I think that's one of the biggest issues in the financial industry is there's so much blanket and general advice out there, which then leads to blanket and general goals and blanket and general plans, which, as you can imagine, isn't very conducive to getting best outcomes with your finances.
Ooh, outcomes with finances. I love it. So talking about that, talk about controlling your money. Because I think that there's this perspective is that money ends up controlling us. Or I think our societal system has said that money is the one that's in control, not us. So I'd love for you to speak more on that.
Well, I mean, if it's stressing you out, then more than it should. If you're missing opportunities with your money and you're afraid of it,
Mm,
and you don't feel good about it, then like say it's got a pretty decent sense of control over you,
yeah.
right? But when I wake up each morning and I know that I'm managing my money the right way. I know, okay, I know what's coming in, what's going out, what needs to be saved, what needs to be paid, right? And then also the amount of money that I'm going to have left over each
Mhm,
month and what that's going towards,
mhm,
right? And then take it even a step further, just like how close I am to hitting my goals. Okay, I have a goal of saving $30,000 by the end of the year. I'm at 25. I've got 5K more to go, and I'm going to do that by profiting 2,500 in November and 2,500 in December,
mhm,
right? It's like that's a sense of control over your money.
mhm,
And so I said this earlier, but money is just a tool,
mhm,
right? And the analogy that always helps me is imagine money as a hammer, right? And a hammer can either be used to build a village or
mhm.
tear down a village,
Yeah.
right? So the use of that hammer is dictated by the human being behind it, operating it. And so, just a couple of things that came to mind. I'll give you a short answer for once when it came
Oh,
to
come on.
control.
What do you say to people when they are so overwhelmed by money that, yes, it is controlling them? how do they even get out of that? Where is the first place to start? Because I think that, there's that sensation of there is such a massive weight on my chest or in my mind, and I can't breathe, and the feeling like I'm so behind. How do you even
Mhm.
just deal with that when it's just so overwhelming, or there's so much debt, or whatever it might be? But it's just those really stressful, heavy feelings. What do you say to entrepreneurs or people in dealing with all of that? Because when you're under that, you feel like you can't crawl out of it.
Mhm. And what came to mind, the authentic answer was like, just give them a safe space to talk about it,
Mm.
right? The more that the darkness is talked about in safe spaces, the less control it has over you,
Oh.
you know? And so just like, let's just talk through it. Let's just get it out there. Let's sit with someone that you know is not judging you, that is hearing you, seeing you, can relate. Um, like I always say, when I signed up to be a financial coach, I definitely signed up for God to put me through a whole bunch of financial tension, right? To give me that depth,
Yeah.
right? Because if I only had financial success, how am I actually supposed to be able to relate to people, let alone influence them and help change their situation?
Yeah.
And so just to be able to sit with people, I'm like, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, let's get it out. Let's talk through it,
Yeah.
right? Usually is medicine in itself.
Yeah.
And
And
then from
without
there,
the judgment.
yeah,
Feel judged.
1000%.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, like, I expect your financial situation to be a little jacked up. You weren't given an opportunity for it really to be anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, just that usually that safe space helps a ton. Then from there, like I just gathered, like I said before, the objectivity, like what's actually going on here. And again, not being insensitive to people's situations, but most times people's financial situations are nowhere near as bad as they think that they are,
Mm.
right? And it's because of that subjectivity. It's because of that negative self-talk. It's because of the trauma. It's because of the unhealthy voices in your life telling you
Mm.
that things are worse, that are projecting their own fears on you, right? Like when I make financial mistakes, the little boy in me just hears my dad yelling at me. And
Mm.
it just makes it so much worse than it
Yeah.
actually is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just being able to gain that objectivity of what's going on,
Yeah.
right? Then I love this part, but like after I have the objectivity, after I understand what's going on, I usually have a solution for what
Mm.
they're going.
Yeah.
And just being able to show that there's not only just hope, but a solution.
Yeah.
And I usually within my programs and coachings and consulting, like I can find you best case scenario.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes it's not pretty, even with the best case scenario, but like just knowing that like you are on the best case scenario plan and strategy for whatever your financial stresses and goals are, just does so much for people.
Yeah. What do you say to people who are perhaps 50 years old and they are freaking out that it's too late? How would you solve that, or how do you give them the light at the end of the tunnel? And I think that generally I look at people are talking about the state of the economy, or just everything that you hear in the news, whether or not it's true. As a PR person, I know that most of the news is actually concocted, so I will say that, and I talk about that often.
It bleeds, it reads.
Yes. What do you say to people like that, where they are at an older age and they're nowhere near where they want to be? Is it solvable? How do you do that?
What came to mind was I actually was just having this conversation with my father-in-law. He's 58 and probably this just exactly what you're saying right now. Doesn't have any money saved, doesn't know what he's gonna do, right? For retirement. And so I brought this to my mentor, Jake, because I wanted to be able to best guide him on this and hear him. And so Jake said, "Do you remember when you interviewed for Hopkins, what you told them your biggest weakness was?"
Mm.
And I said, yeah, finances. Because my
Hmm.
whole life, my parents raised me to be a doctor,
Wow.
right? That was the plan. I had an undergrad degree in nursing and pre-med. And the only reason why I got my master's in healthcare administration was so I could play one more year of college lacrosse. I just
Wow.
happened to get a great job offer by Hopkins, and decided not to go to medical school. So I never took a finance
Wow.
class, none of that, right? I was all science based. And so fast forward 5 years later, and I've got a seven-figure financial coaching company and a seven-figure net worth at 28 years old.
Oh
And
my
so he
God.
was like, that was in 5 years,
Yeah.
right? Your biggest weakness turned to you possibly being the number one expert in the online space on this topic now. And he's like, why can't your father-in-law do something in the same time frame?
I love it. Are you
Five
28 years
years.
old?
No, I'm 32 now.
Okay. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. It's one of those success stories that we all hear about. And I think that's so amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. But I just had to utilize I guess, my own situation. I
Ah,
wasn't trying to be
yeah.
self-serving, but
No,
just to
no, no,
paint a
no. But I
picture
think it's
how
amazing.
fast things can happen, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on the flip side is that I always remember that Martha Stewart started her company when she was 50. And look at that. And I think that they're so amazing. And especially as I've really, pivoted my career, I had won the 40 under 40s. I'm on the list of Canada's top 100 entrepreneurs. And there's a part of me that feels like I already did that, in my younger days. And what am I doing now? But I actually start looking at our legends, if you will, and seeing that again, it's all concocted by the media, but that it's never too late to do anything. You absolutely can do so much. And I was actually reading the other day that Michael Bloomberg started Bloomberg in his 50s. And
Yep, that
now
is
you're
true.
looking at what it is. And I think that there's also a lot of wisdom that comes with age. There's a lot of excitement and risk, if you will, as you're younger. You get a little smarter in your 40s sometimes. You know, I remember going to France on business trips. It was amazing. Would I suggest I do that again? Actually, I would. But why not? Why? Of course, I would go to Canada on business, but I would probably just have a little bit more eyes on the profits or more of the design, the financial design that I wish I had in my business. And I joke about why I'm so good at what I do is because I've made all the mistakes. And
Yes.
I still continue to make them, but what I've also learned to do is not to beat myself up. And I think that goes so much to talking about the subjective and the objective. It's okay, it's not a mistake. It's a learning, it's a lesson, and it's easier said than done. But the voices in my head are probably the worst ones out there. If somebody or anybody find out what I did, people will be like, hey, relax. You did something that didn't work out. Did you learn your lesson?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. There's no voice worse than my own that could berate me more than my own voice. And I really needed to stop being my own enemy because I was wife, and sometimes I still am my own worst enemy. I wanted to go into the relationship with God and the universe and more about the 5D stuff. Could you talk more about that? Because now we've talked so much about the 3D, the actual work, and the relationship with God and the universe, and also perhaps how that impacts on a limiting belief. Because when you start to work with universal laws, in my perspective, that really does change and shift everything. Does that make sense?
It's the number one needle mover in your finances.
Wow.
Right? Money is just energy. It really is. Money is and it's a loop of energy, right? And that loop is it leaving you and coming back, leaving you and coming back, right? And most times when people have a kink in the chain, right, that loop, it's just not understanding what God is calling you to do with your finances, what God is calling you to do with money. And what's authentic to me to share is I think one of the biggest issues is related to probably the most misconstrued Bible verse of all time, where people say money is the root of all evil. But why it's so misconstrued is because the most important part of that verse is missing, which is the love of money is the root of all evil. And if you dive into the interpretation of the love of something back when it was used back when the Bible was written, it means basically if you love something, you worship it, and you can only worship one thing at a time. So if you're worshiping money, guess who that doesn't leave room for?
Mm-hmm.
God, right? And so that's where money goes wrong is when we worship it, when we put it on a pedestal when it's higher than God, right? People often make the mistake by using God as a means to money instead of money as a means to God. Right. And so I think just understanding truthfully what God wants for us, He wants us to be prosperous, right? He wants us to be abundant. The majority of people that God used in the Bible were wealthy people. And if they weren't when He first started using them, they were at the end of it. Right. The book of Proverbs was written by King Solomon. In current day age, he would be by far the richest person. He would be rich. He'd be worth $2.1 trillion.
Wow.
Right, which is more money than Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, all of them put together,
Yeah.
right? And he wrote the book of Proverbs. God used him in a serious way. And
Wow.
so I think just understanding, right, what God is really calling us to do with money is huge,
Mhm.
right? So I've been a Christian for about 8 years now. And when I first got into the Christian space, even growing up Catholic, right? Like you just start reading these Bible verses and you're like, does God hate money? Does he want me to be broke? Like I'm kind of confused here. Right. But
Mhm.
when you really dive into the interpretation, he's just saying he'd rather have you be broke
Mhm.
than be broken with money.
Mm.
Right. He'd rather have you be poor than be excuse my language, a shitty person. Probably shouldn't be cussing while I'm talking about the Bible. A crappy person, right? Then have a lot of money because all money is just a magnifier of who you already are.
Yeah,
Right. If you're a bad person, it's just going to make you a worse person. But if you're a good person, you've got a good heart, that's going to show so much more.
yeah,
Right. And so that's what he's saying in the Bible and a lot of the other verses where it's like, I just would rather have you be broke than be a broken person with a lot of money. But best case scenario, right? You become a great human being and attract a lot of money.
yeah,
You're going to utilize it in a great fashion.
yeah. I love that. And when I understood that money was neutral, it makes somebody, because I used to, and I've always believed that money is good. I don't believe that money is evil. But when you see warlords with tons of money and lots of resources, you wonder about how evil people, or quote unquote evil people, um, how they have money and began to understand that it just amplifies who they are. It makes you understand the neutrality behind everything. And when
Yeah.
I could be calmer about money, then actually it began to naturally attract itself more to me. And I'm still working on that one. And I love what you say about money being a circle or a loop. If you spend with stress, money's always going to be stressful. And then you have to look at your stories about why it is stressful. And oh my gosh, I tell you, by the end of the day, some days I'm just like, I'm so tired from all of this healing and trying to, figure it out, right? It is so much. I just pass out completely because it is such a big thing. Money is, we need it to survive. You can't get away from it. And we've all seen that it's one of the biggest things that does control our life, like you were saying. And thinking about it more, when you think about that you have more love, then naturally, and if it's neutral, you're just naturally going to attract it. And I think that's such a wild concept of this new earth, as we're saying that we're creating. It's just, to me, it's amazing and mind-boggling that it really is just simply about energy and as a resource. And when you talk about the worshiping and worshiping God, one of the phrases that has also sat with me is that when you're worrying about money, you're worshiping the problem. You're not worshiping God. And when I could separate money from the feeling, so money is neutral and stress or happiness or joy about money is a feeling, and they are two separate things. And I think
Mm.
that was such a game changer for me is that what do I actually think or feel about money? And what is the feeling or thought that comes up about money? They're two separate things. And now I'm
Mm.
able to look at it more factually or more neutrally. And, when they say in somatic healing that there's the second arrow of shame, usually. So there's whatever it is that happened, and then there's the shame around it. So again, subjective and objective. That was, like I said, I think that's been my game changer with everything, that I can take myself out from it and say, okay, what if I observe myself? What is this actually about? Things really started to lighten up. And I, again, stopped being my own worst enemy about everything.
Yeah, I love that. I always say money's a piece of paper or a piece of plastic. How could it be evil?
Yeah.
Right? Where it goes wrong is when the human being behind it decides to misuse or abuse it.
Yeah.
You know, think about alcohol. God put alcohol on this earth. Jesus Christ drank wine,
Mhm.
right? Where did alcohol go wrong? When human beings decide to misuse and abuse it, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
And so just a couple of things that I heard. And the last thing I'll say, just one of my favorite books is called Happy Money by Ken Honda.
Yes.
Great book.
Yeah.
And he talks about money's neutral. We assign the energy to it. And a lot of times that energy is how the assignment of that energy is how we spend it. Right. So if you're like, oh, I hate paying this bill, or I'm so stressed about paying my taxes, or screw the IRS, or whatever,
Mhm.
like, oh, groceries are so expensive, and you're swiping your card, that money is going out with some negative energy. So if it even comes back at all,
Yeah.
right, it's just going to come back with the same type of energy.
Yeah.
Right. So when I pay my bills, let me say I'm at the grocery store. Even if I could say it out loud, I do. I'm like, this is going to come back to me times 10.
Mhm.
Right. When I pay my payroll each month and my taxes each month, I always say, God, thank you so much for allowing me to be able to pay this tax bill. Right. Thank you so much for allowing me to be able to put money into 10 different households with this payroll, God.
Yeah.
And so just little simple practices like that will assign a much better and more abundant energy. And I promise you, it won't just come back to you the same way. It'll come back to you in larger quantities.
Yes, it's so true. I know did Ken's program a number of years ago, and he says arigato, thank you in Japanese to his money. And it's
Yep.
just so simple. And it's true, is that the happiness, the joy, and if everything is energetic, well, then why wouldn't you have the joy and the peace with money? Because that's actually its truest intention.
Mm.
There you go. Oh my gosh, I loved our conversation so much. Do you have anything else you want to wrap with?
Anything else? I mean, I'm thinking second episode length here and some of my responses. And
Always.
so I won't leave you with anything too long. But I guess what was authentic that came to mind was, when it comes to money, you have two options.
Mm,
Right? It's the stress of addressing or the stress of avoiding. You might as well pick the one that's got a return on investment, right?
yes.
And so the time is going to pass either way. It's our decision on how we want to utilize it. And so in 12 months, we're going to be looking back and it's like you're either going to be in a better spot or the same spot. And the beautiful part is we have almost full control over that outcome.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The answer is in our hands. Everything. We're the source. We are the source, and everything is in our hands and our ability to do it. So thank you
Mm.
so much, Justin. We're going to leave all of Justin's contact details and Instagram, and you can learn more about JFF. They're all going to be in the show notes, and I highly recommend you go and check it out because this will change your relationship and with money and your finances. So check it out and check Justin out. Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Powerful Podcast. I've so enjoyed sharing all of my insights, all my mistakes, all of my learnings as I grew and scaled my business from 6 to 7 figures. If you enjoyed this, please leave us a review. And then I'll send you back my top 3 ways to make $10,000. And I tell you, they're super easy, super creative, and super easy for you to implement. So please drop us the review, send it over, and we will send you back with my top 3 ways to make $10,000.